What's going on, folks? We're here in Stu's garage, and today I'm finally going to be telling you guys what the lowdown is for this electric power steering pump conversion. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have here. So this car is a 1990 Mustang, obviously with an LS swap, which is irrelevant for this video because it doesn't matter what motor's in your car. Really what matters is what power steering lines you have in your rack and things like that. So as you can see, this is my Volvo power steering pump right here. I can't necessarily say what vehicle this came out of. There's several Volvos that do have this pump. Any Volvo that has electric power steering has this pump. Some of them still have the old style accessory power steering, but basically this is the pump that you're going to see. There's a couple of variations of it, which I'll show you later on in the video. Why did I go with this pump? For one, I went with it just because I just wanted to try it out. This whole vehicle, this entire build is really just for me trying different things out, you know, just kind of seeing how things work, trying new stuff. The second reason I wanted to do it is just for simplicity reasons. As you can see on this motor swap setup, I have very few accessories. I have my water pump, I have my alternator, and that's about it. So if you're looking for a more efficient accessory setup, you don't want to put an extra belt or pulley or accessory on your actual engine, this is going to help you to trim that down and run less accessories. Also, in my application, the setup that I have with everything I have in here is going to make motor swaps really easy. In the back of my mind, when I put the LS in here, I kind of always had it in my mind that I might change to another motor later on down the road, and if I ever did, I could literally just take the engine out and put the new engine in with its electronics, and I wouldn't really have to mess with anything else in the engine bay because the motor is an independent entity in this car. The motor doesn't depend on anything else, nothing else depends on the motor. It just kind of works in there by itself. It doesn't care what power steering there is, you know, the fuel regulator, all of this stuff in here is universal. So that's just the way I designed it, but anyways, that's getting besides the point. So let's go ahead and look at this power steering pump. What you have here is this thing is really a direct replacement for what you already have. And as a matter of fact, you could even leave your power steering pump in here if you have an old 5.0 or even a 4.6 Mustang just to try it out. But what we have here is this line here is the stock high pressure power steering line. I didn't change it, I didn't modify it or anything. I believe this is a 6AN or -6AN fitting size. You may want to verify the size, but I believe this is a 6AN. And basically I just took the high pressure line off of the power steering pump, which would be in this area. I plugged it in here. I took the return line. I went ahead and cut the old return line out and added this braided steel line just because I like the way that it looks, but your old return line will work perfectly fine. It goes here on this tube and to return your fluids in there, and that's pretty much it. So as far as your wiring goes, you're gonna have two wires. Let's get some light in here. All right, so as far as your wiring goes, you're gonna see two wires coming out. The red one obviously is going to go to your power. The black one obviously is going to go to your ground. So you go ahead and you wire these directly to your power source, which is going to be your battery. This is always going to be wired to a hot source. So this wire is always going to get power at all times. This one obviously is going to get ground at all times. What actually turns this pump on and off is going to be your signal wires down here. So as you can see, I've got three wires here. You really only need one of these. These other wires are just wrapped up here in the tape just because I didn't want to cut them off in case I figure out what the other ones do later on. But you see we've got a blue wire, a blue and gray wire, and a gray wire. All you need is this gray wire. So I've got this gray wire in here wired to a 12 volt switch. When this gray wire sees 12 volts, it turns the pump on, and that's basically it. There's like a 3-second delay before the pump comes on, so if you ever try this yourself and you touch this wire to power while this unit has power and it doesn't come on immediately, don't freak out. Hold it there for like 3 seconds and then the pump goes on. It's designed to do that. The relay for this pump is built in, so you don't need a relay. What I do have is an 80 amp breaker, because this draws like 70 amps or something like that. So when you put this in, you are going to want to have an alternator that can handle the draw, especially if you're running electric fans or whatever other electronics you have in your car. I have a 160 alternator, which is more than beefy enough to handle my fans, the power steering, and whatever else I have going on inside the car. You definitely wouldn't want to do that with the stock like 80 amp alternator that your Fox body comes with. And if you want to upgrade that, it's easy to do a 3G upgrade. I have videos on that as well. So to go over the wiring one more time, this red wire goes all the way around. It passes through my 80 amp breaker, which you don't have to use a breaker, you can use a fuse. And then it goes to my 12 volt power source. And this that you see right here is equivalent to the plus side on my battery. I have a remote battery. This is where the plus side comes under my hood. So this is the power source for under my hood, but you could run this straight to your battery. And of course the ground comes around. I have them taped together just for neatness, but this is my grounding block. It's grounded to the chassis, and this big fat wire here is the ground for this. The gray wire, which is the only wire I need off of this, goes to a switch, which is basically a switch 12 volt source. So I have mine wired to a switch. You could wire yours to an ignition source, so when you turn the key, it kicks the pump on for you and you don't have to turn it on separately. So let's go ahead and do a quick little demonstration of how the pump works so you can hear it. So here's my switch panel, and I've got all my stuff wired to this. This is the switch for the power steering, and you just heard it cut on. It took a couple of seconds to come on, and that's what it sounds like. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that off because I don't want to kill my battery because the car's not running. And the advantages for that is that if I ever stall the car, I'm not gonna lose my power steering. So for instance, I had a situation where I was coming down an exit ramp. This is on my previous motor. It had a cam in it. It didn't like to idle, that well. I pressed the clutch in and stalled the car coming down an exit ramp, and all of my steering tightened up, and I almost crashed on the exit ramp, making a curve because I couldn't turn the car. On this setup, I've got an angle kit, angle mods, all of that stuff. My steering geometry is different. It's very difficult to turn this car without power assistance. So that's what caused me to almost have an accident. So with the independent power steering, it doesn't care whether or not the motor is on. I can turn this car, I can steer this car with the motor off, which was helpful because when I blew that engine up and we were trying to steer this thing onto the trailer, I could turn the wheel just like I was driving normal because I just ran the power steering pump and I was able to steer the car around. So there's different advantages. So a lot of people go for the MR2 power steering pump, which has been a tried and true option for a lot of years now, but that thing's like $350. These things you can find much cheaper on eBay. I am selling a couple of them. If you guys are interested, just hit me up. But the cool thing about the Volvo one is it's actually a Ford part. So I don't know if you can see it, but that's a Ford logo right there, Ford Motor Company parts. So that's a Ford, it's a genuine Ford part. All right, so this is a much cheaper option than the MR2 pump. I don't know what it takes to install the MR2 pump, but I like this one. And if I ever break this one, I can easily put another one in. As far as the install goes, as you can see here, I made my own bracket. These two bolts are the only thing holding it in. It's very stable. If I ever break this thing, I pull those two bolts out, I unloosen my pressure lines, and I can swap this thing out. So let's go over here and take a look at the variations of this pump that you have. You've got this one right here, which is the exact one that I'm running inside the car. It's got the reservoir and the cap built in, just like that. You have this version that you may see, which has the remote reservoir sitting up top. And this is because there's a different underhood layout for the car that this came out of. It works exactly the same. It just has this neck up here. So if you don't want that, you may have to fabricate yourself a lid here for fitment purposes, or you can, you know, it's up to you just how you want to mount it and how you want to make it work on your application. But these two pumps are actually exactly the same, besides the actual shape of the reservoir. The third pump that I have here is very similar, but there are some differences. This is a Mazda 3 power steering pump. So this may be the easiest one for you to get your hands on, especially in junkyards and stuff, because there's always Mazda 3s in junkyards. I just don't know exactly how to make this one work. I haven't experimented with it. I'm not sure, but from what I can see, it's got the big fat power wires here, but it's got 3 wires over here on this side. It's got 2 wires on this side. So as far as I know, or what I think, it may work the same way. You just have to figure out which wire to connect to power. The other way it may work is it may want to see a pulse, like an on-off. You're gonna have to figure it out. And if you do figure it out, let me know, because I'd like to share it with other folks. But I was in the junkyard, I saw this one, I grabbed it, I figured I'd look at it. So all of these pumps are for sale. If you need one, I'll sell it to you for like $180. The thing is, if you buy one from me, you're gonna get the wiring harness with it, which is very expensive. If you try to get one of these things on eBay or something like that, they never come with a wiring harness. So I don't even know where you can get these wires from, but I have them. So buy one for me, please, because I need money to fix my engine. So anyways, I do have a couple of these for sale. So the last thing I want to do is go over how this thing actually works in the car and what my opinions of it is. Basically, I really like it. It has enhanced my steering feel. The steering wheel actually feels the way I feel like a steering wheel should feel. If you drive a Fox body, you know that you can spin the steering wheel with just one finger. There's completely no resistance to it. There's no feel. There's like no feedback. With this one, I finally have a firm steering wheel. It feels like driving a modern day car, because this one doesn't put out as much pressure or whatever as the stock Fox body power steering pump. This one is a more modern feel. As far as reliability and how it works, so again, on my setup, there's a ton less mechanical advantage because I have the shortened steering arms and things like that. It's way harder for forces to turn my front wheels because of my steering geometry. This thing does get the job done. I would give it, I don't know, like a B- as far as performance goes. It doesn't like fast movements on my setup. So when I mean fast movements, like if I was to jerk the wheel one way and then another way and then back the other way, like you would do in autocross, I would not recommend this for autocross based on my experience. It may work on a car with regular steering geometry, but on this car in particular, I would have a very difficult time with autocross. So if you'd imagine, you know, weaving your car back and forth like a NASCAR does when they try to start, when they try to warm their tires up in between laps when the pace car is out or whatever, I wouldn't be able to do that in this car. However, at the track for drifting, I had absolutely no issues with it. I was able to move the steering wheel fine. Racing would be the same way, making turns. Everything would be fine. Daily driving, I wouldn't notice. So if you daily drive your car and you wanted this setup, it would be perfectly fine. So honestly, I could recommend this for pretty much any setup except for autocross, based on my experience. If you watched my previous video, you saw that I hopped out. I had some issues with this. Honestly, I think those issues were because my rack limiters actually broke, which is completely unrelated to that, but my rack limiters broke. The wheels were getting too much angle and they were actually grinding up against the control arm. So between the wheels grinding on the control arm and me trying to force them to go more than what they were basically able to go, I think that I just overheated the pump. Maybe it has some kind of a thermal shutdown built in on the inside, but the pump basically just shut off. You know, as we looked the car over for about 10 or 15 minutes or whatever, I flipped the switch back on. The pump came back on like nothing. It was ready to go. I'm not really sure. I think the pump just ended up shutting itself down. But it worked fine. It's working now, as you heard. It's doing its thing. The last thing is, when I installed it, I had a lot of trouble getting the system completely bled. It could be because I have a leak in my power steering rack somewhere. It is dripping from somewhere, again, unrelated to the pump. But if you have a leaking system somewhere, it's very hard to bleed your system. However, once I did have this thing on the road for a couple of days, it did bubble out all the bubbles by itself, and there was no more funny business with how the thing felt. So, like I said, I highly recommend this pump, this DIY, for anything besides autocross. In autocross, there's too much back and forth. You know, with the wheel, there's too many quick small movements. You're gonna bog your pump down, and you're gonna have inconsistent steering feel. Daily driving, you're gonna be absolutely fine. You're gonna love it. So if any of you guys have any questions on this power steering setup, definitely hit me up. Like I said, I have like 2 or 3 of these pumps for sale. Please hit me up because I need money to fix my motor. And I think that's about it.